Snow had been falling since before dawn, the kind that softened edges and muffled sound, turning the world into something quieter and heavier at the same time. By the hour the auction yard opened, the ground was already packed white and gray, churned by boots and tires into a slick, frozen skin. Breath rose in clouds from men and animals alike, hanging briefly before dissolving into the low winter sky. The auction barn stood hunched against the cold, its tin roof rattling faintly in the wind, its doors yawning open to receive whatever the season had not yet claimed. Ethan Cole arrived without hurry. He parked at the far edge of the lot, where snow lay mostly untouched, and sat for a moment with the engine idling, hands resting on the wheel. He had not planned to buy anything. He rarely did. He came because auctions were one of the few places left where he could stand among living creatures and not be expected to speak. Here, silence was allowed. Here, grief blended in. He stepped out into the cold, pulling his coat tighter, and joined the slow movement toward the barn. Inside, the air was sharp with hay, manure, and damp wool. Voices echoed off the walls, rough and practical, punctuated by the rapid chant of the auctioneer. Horses were led through the ring one by one, the hooves clattering, their eyes wide or dull, depending on how much life had already asked of them. Bidders lifted hands, nodded, scratched chins. Value was decided in seconds. Ethan stood near the back, as he always did, his cap pulled low, his gaze steady but distant. He watched without wanting. He had learned, over the years, how dangerous wanting could be. Each animal passed, was priced, and disappeared through the far gate. The rhythm was efficient, almost merciful. Then there was a pause, brief but noticeable, as if the flow itself had hesitated. A handler led in a foal. It was small for its age, its winter coat rough and uneven, clinging too tightly to a frame that had not been given enough time or care. One leg favored the ground cautiously, not enough to draw alarm, but enough to draw disinterest. The foal did not resist the lead rope. It did not toss its head or cry out. It simply stood there, ears forward, eyes dark and watchful, absorbing the noise and movement as if storing it away. The auctioneer barely slowed his chant. A few heads turned, then turned back. Someone near the front snorted softly. The first bid did not come. The second did not either. The foal shifted its weight, steadying itself, and looked out over the crowd. That was when Ethan felt it. Not a thought, not yet, but a tightening low in his chest, familiar and unwelcome. He told himself it was nothing. Cold, perhaps. Memory. He had learned to mistrust sudden feelings. Still, his eyes remained fixed on the animal in the ring. There was something wrong. Yes, but not in the way people assumed. The foal's stillness was not weakness. It was restraint. Its gaze moved slowly, deliberately, settling on faces without fear. When its eyes found Ethan, they did not slide away. They held. He shifted his stance, uncomfortable with the attention, though no one else seemed to notice. For a moment, the noise of the barn faded. He was back in another winter, another place, standing helpless while something small depended on him to choose correctly. He swallowed, jaw tightening. A low bid was finally called, then withdrawn. Someone laughed. The auctioneer's voice pressed on, impatient now. Ethan looked down at his boots, dusted white, and told himself to let the moment pass. He had come to watch, nothing more. He had already learned what happened when he tried to save what the world had decided to discard. The foal stumbled, just slightly, then caught itself. No one moved. The handler tugged the rope, annoyed. The animal lifted its head again, breath puffing in short, controlled bursts. It did not cry out. It did not fight. Ethan raised his eyes once more. He saw, suddenly, not the thinness or the leg or the certainty of loss everyone else saw, but endurance. He saw a creature still listening, still present, still willing to stand. The realization unsettled him more than pity ever could. He felt the weight of a question settle over him, quiet but insistent. He could walk away. He had walked away before. He knew exactly how to do it. The auctioneer called again, voice sharp. Time narrowed. Ethan's hand lifted before his mind fully agreed. It rose slowly, almost reluctantly, but it rose. The chant stopped. Heads turned now. A number was called. The hammer fell with a flat, final sound. The foal was his. The truck moved slowly along the back road, tires crunching through snow that had hardened into uneven ridges. Ethan kept both hands on the wheel, eyes fixed ahead, though his attention drifted off into the small shape visible in the side mirror. The Foal stood in the trailer without panic, legs braced, head low, adjusting to each turn with quiet determination. That steadiness unsettled him. Fragile things were supposed to protest. They were supposed to fail loudly. This one did neither. By the time he reached the ranch, dusk had already begun its long winter descent. The property lay at the end of a narrow lane, bordered by bare cottonwoods and drifts piled like walls. The house was dark, as it often was, but the barn still stood, weathered yet stubborn, its silhouette familiar against the pale sky. Ethan parked near the doors and sat for a moment, listening to the engine tick as it cooled. Doubt crept in then, sharp and unwelcome. He had acted without thinking, and now thought arrived in force. He stepped out and opened the trailer. Cold air rushed in. The Foal did not bolt. It waited, ears flicking, eyes alert, as if assessing the place it had been brought to. Ethan let it down carefully, his movements slow, his voice low though he had not intended to speak. The Foal followed, favoring the same leg, but never stopping. Together they crossed the frozen yard and entered the barn, where old straw and lingering warmth offered some shelter from the wind. Inside, time seemed to settle. Ethan closed the doors and leaned his forehead briefly against the wood, breathing out. The barn had been empty for years. He had kept it standing out of habit, not hope. Now it held another life, and that reality pressed in on him from all sides. He fetched water, then hay, then stood watching as the Foal lowered its head and sniffed cautiously. It did not eat right away. It simply stood, absorbing the space, the silence, the man. Ethan told himself not to expect gratitude. Animals did not owe people anything. Still, he felt a faint sting of disappointment when the Foal turned away from the feed. He checked its leg, gently, fingers brushing along muscle and bone. The Foal tensed, but did not pull back. The injury was old, poorly healed, but not hopeless. That word lodged itself in Ethan's thoughts. He pushed it aside. Night fell fully. The temperature dropped. Ethan brought out an old blanket and draped it carefully over the Foal's back. The animal flinched at first, then stilled, allowing the weight. Ethan hesitated, then rested a hand briefly against its shoulder, feeling warmth beneath the rough coat. The contact sent a quiet shock through him. It had been a long time since anything had stood close, without demanding explanation. Later in the house, he poured himself a cup of coffee he did not drink and sat at the table staring at nothing. The Foal's presence echoed through the walls, changing the shape of the silence. He thought of the cost, the work, the likely outcome. He thought of mornings that would now require him to rise. Responsibility settled over him, heavy and inescapable. For a moment, he considered calling someone, asking advice, admitting uncertainty. The thought passed. He had spent years learning how to carry things alone. Sleep came in fragments. More than once he rose and pulled on his coat, returning to the barn to check the Foal. Each time, it stood or lay quietly, breathing slow, eyes following him with calm attention. Near dawn, Ethan brought warm water and tried again to feed it. This time, the Foal ate a little, carefully, as if testing trust. Ethan watched until the last strand disappeared, then turned away before relief could fully surface. Days followed in measured rhythm. The Foal ate more. The leg remained weak, but stable. Ethan cleaned the stall, brushed the coat, spoke only when necessary, which was rarely. Yet words slipped out sometimes, names of tools, fragments of weather, memories he did not realize were waiting. The Foal listened without reacting, presence steady as a metronome. On the third evening, a storm rolled in hard and fast. Wind howled through the trees, rattling the barn doors. Ethan checked the latches twice, then sat on an overturned bucket nearby. The Foal paced once, then returned to him, standing close enough that Ethan could feel its warmth through his coat. He did not move away. Something shifted then, subtle but undeniable. Ethan rested his hand against the Foal's neck, not to comfort it, but because he needed grounding himself. The animal leaned into the touch, weight shared, breath slow. Outside, the storm raged. Inside, something fragile and new took shape, unnoticed but real, waiting to be named. Winter deepened its hold, and with it came change that Ethan had not invited but could no longer ignore. Tracks began appearing in the snow beyond his own, faint at first, then clearer. A neighbor stopped one afternoon, claiming curiosity more than concern, and left after a quiet look at the foal, shaking his head as if something did not add up. Another came days later, then another, each visit brief, respectful, carrying the same unspoken question. Ethan answered none of them. He kept working, kept tending, kept the barn doors mostly closed. The foal grew stronger in small, undeniable ways. Its coat thickened, its breathing steadied. The leg remained imperfect, but the animal learned its limits and moved within them with patience that felt deliberate rather than resigned. Ethan noticed how it watched people, how its ears followed emotion more than sound. When children from a nearby farm wandered in one afternoon, drawn by rumor and boredom, the foal did not retreat. It stood quietly as they approached, allowing careful hands to touch its neck, its shoulder, its mane. The children grew calmer, without realizing why. Ethan watched from a distance, unsettled by the ease of it. Word traveled faster after that. Not excitement, exactly, but recognition. A retired veteran arrived one morning and stood silently in the stall for several minutes, eyes closed, hand resting against the foal's side. When he left, he thanked Ethan without explanation. A woman brought her restless teenage son, who lingered longer than planned, mucking stalls, without complaint. Ethan saw the pattern forming before he understood it. The foal did not perform. It did not fix. It simply existed in a way that allowed others to settle. The call came on a gray afternoon, voice professional, curious. Someone had noticed markings, posture, lineage clues missed at the auction. Records were checked. History surfaced. The foal's bloodline traced back to a rare breeding program, known not for speed or show, but temperament. Calm, perceptive, responsive to distress. Horses bred not to be ridden hard, but to hold space. The truth landed heavily. What Ethan had saved by instinct was not ordinary, and that knowledge changed the way others looked at him. Offers followed. Polite at first, then persistent. Programs, buyers, institutions with resources Ethan lacked. Each conversation ended the same way, with him asking for time and the other party assuming agreement would come. The pressure unsettled the barn. The foal sensed it, grew restless when unfamiliar vehicles appeared. Ethan felt the old fear return, the one that whispered he was unqualified, temporary, a caretaker at best. The conflict sharpened during a winter gathering at the community hall, where Ethan had brought the foal at reluctant insistence. Snow fell thick outside, wind rattling windows. People gathered close, talking quietly, watching. Near the far wall, a small child froze, breath hitching, eyes wide as panic took hold. Before anyone could intervene, the foal moved forward on its own, slow and careful, stopping just short of the child. It lowered its head and waited. The child reached out, fingers curling into coarse winter hair, and breathed again. The room changed. Not loudly, not suddenly, but completely. What had been curiosity became understanding. Eyes softened. Voices dropped. Ethan felt something loosen inside him, a knot he had carried for years. He saw, finally, that this was not about possession or value. It was about presence, about choosing to stay. When the offers were raised again, this time in front of others, Ethan answered clearly. He said no. He said the foal was home. The words surprised even him. Silence followed, then nods, then acceptance. Snow fell outside as if sealing the moment. Ethan stood taller than he had in years, hand resting on the foal's neck, aware that the path ahead would be harder, but certain now it was his. A year passed, measured not by calendars, but by quiet mornings and steady routines that rebuilt something Ethan thought winter had taken for good. The ranch no longer felt abandoned. Snow still covered the fields, yet paths were worn by regular footsteps, human and animal alike. The barn held warmth again, not only from repaired boards and fresh straw, but from purpose. People arrived without signs or schedules, guided by need rather than advertisement. Ethan welcomed them with simple nods, offering space instead of answers, and learned that consistency itself could be a form of healing for everyone involved here. The The foal had grown into a young horse with a broader chest and calmer eyes, its limbs softened by careful care and time. Ethan never tried to correct what could not be forced. He adapted instead, building days around patience. Visitors noticed how the horse waited, how it breathed with those beside it, how silence gathered gently around its presence. Veterans slept more deeply after standing near it. Children spoke more freely while brushing its coat. Ethan watched these changes quietly, realizing he was no longer merely keeping something alive, but stewarding a place where others could rest safely together. Ethan changed as surely as the seasons he once endured without noticing. His shoulders eased. His gaze lifted. He spoke when spoken to, then sometimes first. The grief he carried did not vanish, but it no longer commanded every room of his life. Working beside the horse taught him restraint, attention, and the value of staying when leaving would have been easier. He understood now that healing was not a sudden miracle, but a series of choices repeated daily, often unseen, often unrewarded, yet powerful enough to reshape a man and redefine his quiet future forward with humility and hope. The ranch evolved without ceremony. A few stalls were added, a small heated room built for winter visits, a table placed near the barn where coffee stayed warm. There were no banners, no grand announcements. People came by word and left by feeling changed. Ethan kept records only to remember names, not outcomes. The horse remained central, not as attraction, but as anchor. Ethan protected that simplicity fiercely, knowing how easily good intentions could become noise that drowned the very stillness people sought, especially during fragile moments of trust and renewal that arrived quietly each day without asking permission ever. On a late winter morning, with frost clinging to every rail, Ethan stood alone brushing the horse in long, deliberate strokes. Breath curled between them. Neither rushed. He rested his forehead briefly against the warm neck, feeling the steady rhythm beneath skin and muscle. No words passed. None were needed. In that silence, Ethan acknowledged the truth he had resisted for years, that purpose could return without replacing loss, and that love did not require permanence to be real or sustaining. It simply required presence, patience, and the courage to remain when walking away once felt safer than staying still. As spring hinted beyond the frozen horizon, visitors continued arriving, some new, some returning with quieter eyes. Ethan greeted each with the same calm respect he offered the horse. He learned when to speak and when to step aside. The space taught him as much as it taught them. He understood now that what he had built was not a solution, but a refuge, and that refuge did not need explanation to justify its existence. It survived through attention, humility, and an unwavering commitment to gentleness in every ordinary moment shared together by those seeking rest from heavy lives elsewhere. Ethan no longer feared the future as an empty stretch of cold days. He planned carefully, repaired fences before they failed, and trusted help when it was offered. The horse followed him through chores, a quiet shadow, its presence grounding and constant. Together, they represented something neither could have become alone. Ethan accepted that truth with gratitude rather than disbelief, allowing himself to imagine years ahead not as endurance, but as shared time shaped by intention rooted in care, patience, and mutual survival earned slowly through seasons of quiet work and honest attention each morning under wide winter skies together. The horse, now strong enough to roam the pasture's edge, still returned when called, not by command, but by choice. Ethan respected that choice above all else. It reminded him that connection could not be owned. Watching the animal move against the snow, he saw resilience without hardness, strength without noise. These qualities reshaped his understanding of leadership, teaching him that guidance often meant standing still, offering safety, and trusting others to find their own balance within uncertainty rather than forcing direction upon lives already carrying invisible weight that deserve patience and dignity above hurried solutions or loud promises ever. When asked what changed him, Ethan offered no speech. He pointed instead to the barn, the tracks in snow, the steady animal waiting nearby. His story lived in gestures rather than explanations. Those who understood stayed. Those who did not still felt something soften. Ethan accepted both responses without judgment. He had learned that healing was not convincing others, but remaining open long enough for truth to reveal itself naturally, in its own unforced time, a process requiring humility, patience, and sustained presence from those willing to witness, without expectation or demand for immediate transformation or recognition afterward from crowds. At dusk, as snow settled gently again, Ethan closed the barn doors and rested his hand against the familiar wood. The horse stood inside, calm and waiting. The future no longer frightened him. It invited him. In that invitation, he found peace. Now, click on the video on the screen to hear a story even more miraculous than this one. You will cry, and then feel whole again. Click it now. We will be waiting. Stay here, trust this space, and allow another quiet miracle to unfold slowly before your eyes tonight with patience, hope, and courage guiding you forward.